Well, here we are again, and this week is just a little something about constructivism. Now, at a POS 160 level, at a lower level, we're not going to get too deep into this, but we're still going to get into it. What is constructivism, and how does it contrast with the other theories? Well, constructivism, and when we get into later, more postmodern interpretive methods, ontologically speaking, makes and posits the argument that reality is suspect. Now, it depends on the level of constructivism you're dealing with. So ontology first is the study of reality. Does reality exist? Or is reality what we make of it? And as Wendt would talk about, anarchy is what we make of it. What does that even mean? Well, that can mean a lot of different things. But in a nutshell, they're basically saying that norms, ideas, how we perpetuate and legitimize meaning matters on the international scale. So it's not just, we're social animals, right? As a result, the world does not just exist, it's actually socially constructed. As you see behind me, I took this picture, and this is in Barcelona. And I always have my students reading things about, the real lucha, the fight for independence. But that's Spanish, luchar, which is kind of interesting because they see Spain as being imperialist and have their own language, right? So, Catalonia is fighting for independence. So when they had the vote, the Spanish government went in and brutalized it and dragged old people and everyone else from the polls, etc., and actually imprisoned a lot of these independent leaders or leaders for independence. Right behind me is something that says, hey, liberty for the political prisoners, right? And it's not Spanish. It's not la libertad. It's a language I can't really speak. But this is their argument, right? So it's socially constructed, the whole situation. Are these people illegal, right? Or are they just fighting for what they deserve, and that's self-determination, and they're basically political prisoners? And this is going to get really, really big, because if we socially construct the world, then what is reality? Ontologically speaking, constructivists do see a reality. When we get into the more postmodern interpretive, reality becomes even more suspect. And this is very, very important, because as we'll see, I always have you see the Donald Duck video, that, you have to socially construct enemies. Enemies don't just exist, it's socially constructed over time. And even though they have hardware, right? Machinery, here's a computer, a very cheap one because I'm so poor. But you basically have machinery, weapons, etc. But it's not until we give meaning to these things that they play out in international politics. So what does that mean? Well, when the United States of America wants to create these anti-ballistic missile and THAAD, the theater thing there, they basically have meaning. So if the United States of America develops a missile program or anti-ballistic or anti-missile program that actually shoots them down, THAAD is part of that, you basically, right, have Canadians happy. You might have the Polish happy. You might have other people happy. Well, what about the security dilemma? If the security dilemma exists, that means when I develop my military or anti-ballistic missile systems, you should be threatened. But they're not. So there's meaning behind weaponry. So for the Canadians, because as we know, Canada is just another state of the United States. Just kidding to my Canadian students. But did you know the Canadians have on its flag a maple leaf? You can never be tough with a maple leaf. So they depend on us, the United States of America. And we're friends. We had a good friendship with the Canadians. But Cuba would see that as a threat. Russia might see something as a threat that Poland, right, being a little more conservative and under the aegis of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, would see as positive. So these missiles don't just exist, they exist with meaning. So a warship from the United States might be threatening to one country and not another. And that's where you get constructivism, and that's its value in a nutshell. So we have anarchy, but it's not until we give anarchy meaning. So why don't we have, say, bad relations with Canada? Well, Mearsheimer would talk about how because we're so much tougher than Canada, which is totally true. Canada has a maple leaf, so even if it had nuclear weapons, it can't be tough. But the thing, can you imagine walking into war? People have lions, bears, eagles, and the Canadians have a maple leaf. You're set up to lose a war no matter what in that area. But it's not necessarily because we can defeat Canada in a war, which we can. It's the fact that we have a friendship and we've socially constructed over time this kind of friendship, and it has meetings, and we've created norms, etc. The same with the UK. The constructivists would look at why does the UK say enter into Brexit, that is, they voted for it. A lot of people say because they have a stronger relationship built over time because of language, culture, etc. with the United States than they do with mainland Europe. Maybe the UK doesn't feel connected. It doesn't have an identity with Europe. So this is one of the things that's really, really important to understand, because a lot of people will say, we just live in a world of anarchy, security dilemma, self-help, but the constructivists are bringing something else to it. And that's what I like about it. It's bringing meaning, norms, identity, etc. And that's why if you see a video on Turkey, obviously it was before all the problems now, but they're basically saying, hey, Turkey, one of the reasons why Turkey isn't allowed in the European Union is because of its lack of Christian identity. It has a more Muslim identity. It's not European enough. But in the video, they talk about how it is enough. It is very European. And they try to make the argument that Turkey is a European, that it's developing, etc. Now we obviously know Turkey's going in a different direction, it seems now, but regardless, identity matters. So it's not necessarily Turkey isn't in the European Union or is rejected from the European Union because it's geographically an issue. It's basically culturally an issue, and that's what they start looking at. The constructivists look at this identity that we have in politics. So it'll look at like British identity, US identity, etc., the meaning and how this means, and what this means for international politics. And I'm partial to the constructivist view, but I also like the realist, and I also like the liberal institutionalists. I think they all have value here. And what we're going to basically do is apply these theories to the Ukraine crisis in that video. So that's a pretty good thing. Now, I do different activities, but one of the activities I do, I apply this. You're going to see possibly a video on Turkey. You're going to see a video on Donald Duck, how it's just not, the Nazis were bad, but you have to actually socially construct and convince people to go out there and fight. So it's not just that you have an enemy is socially constructed over time. And if you see old Bullwinkle shows, Boris and Natasha were Russian, obviously, and they were always having evil characteristics. That was socially constructing a certain divide between Russia and the United States through cartoons. So Boris and Natasha were bad. Why were they bad? Because they're Russian, and that's what they are. Russians are deviant, Russians are this, and this was kind of the creation during the Cold War. Of course, not all Russians are bad or any kind of people are bad, but that's kind of the social construction. And when you see a Donald Duck video, Donald Duck, they actually used this to get us into World War II, to convince us to pay our taxes. The Nazis are bad. The Japanese are bad. Now, obviously, the Germans haven't even doing bad things, but a lot of people do bad things. You have to socially construct a certain situation in order for them. And discourse, cartoons, something that seems innocuous, helps do this. And the thing, I authored a piece in Oxford University Press on, and I'll do this. I do this in my U.S. foreign policy class, and I think my national security class on discourse and foreign policy. And discourse matters. The discourse we create in the world matters. So if someone's a freedom fighter or a terrorist is definitely a big meaning. So when we get into the part of postmodernism, the UK would have called our forefathers and mothers, Martha Washington, George Washington, who are these people? Hamilton. It said bandits, terrorism, etc. They wouldn't say, oh yeah, you're freedom fighters. And this becomes problematic because what are these people behind? right? Are the people in prison who are moving for independence of Catalonia from Spain, are they freedom fighters? Or are they, illegal terrorist bandits, etc.? Benedict Arnolds, etc. And so this meaning is extremely important. So in the case of, like, say, Saudi Arabia and Iran, it's true. If Iran gets nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia wants to get nuclear weapons, and this might create an arms race. And this is based on the security dilemma pushed by realists. However, another point on this is, if a friend of Saudi Arabia, like the United States, begins to develop weapon systems, like I said, anti-ballistic missiles, etc., that can shoot things down, the Saudis will be happy because we're friends with Saudi Arabia, not Iran, and Iran is actually nervous. So it depends on the meaning you give these weapons. And this is extremely important for constructivism. And we're going to apply this also, like, to the Ukrainian crisis, right? A lot of people in the Ukraine actually do identify as Russian speakers and with Russia, and are supportive of Putin, where others aren't. And identity has a lot to do with that crisis. I mean, a lot of people say, no, wait, I'm Ukrainian first, and I'm not Russian, and we have our own indigenous language, etc. But then other people say, no, I feel still part of Russia, etc. And you see this with the former Yugoslavia, right? People wanted to be part of Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and they started getting into their more linguistic groups, religious groups, etc., with which they feel identity. So identity politics, norms, values, all these things, how we socially construct the world. The value of constructivism is it brings this social world to the table. And no matter what you think of constructivism, neorealism, neoliberal institutionalism, the nation state, which we went over, is that this is the value they bring. And I think that this is an important value, because discourse, how we speak, how we think of the world matters. So an enemy just isn't an enemy. An enemy is socially constructed over time. And this is extremely important. So I'm going to stop there. And I hope you people have learned a lot so far, and doing the assignments, etc. Reach out to me. If you have any questions, or leave a comment. In my classes, I have what they call community forums, and that allows students to kind of chat in this community forum in a very respectful way. And then if someone has a question, they can ask it, and then I can answer, and other people can ask as well.